Marcus Williams was 38 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp eyes that had seen enough of life to know exactly how the world worked. He had the kind of presence that demanded attention, except tonight, no one was paying him any. He stood at the edge of a luxurious ballroom, dressed in a white waiter's uniform, holding a silver tray with crystal champagne flutes. The room was filled with Wall Street titans, CEOs, and old money elites, all sipping overpriced liquor and laughing like they owned the world. And as far as they were concerned, Marcus didn't exist. No one looked at the waiters. No one thanked them. No one cared. Marcus didn't grow up around chandeliers and six-figure wines. He came from a neighborhood where streetlights barely worked and dinner wasn't guaranteed. His mother worked endless shifts cleaning hotel rooms. His father had disappeared when he was just a kid. At 15, Marcus got his first job in a kitchen, washing dishes in a restaurant where the customers spent more on appetizers than his family did on groceries for a month. He watched, learned, and promised himself one thing. One day, he wouldn't be the one serving. He'd be the one being served. It took years of grinding, sleepless nights, and risks that could have ruined him completely. But eventually, he made it. He built something of his own, something big. And now he was back in a room just like the one from his past, except this time he wasn't here to take orders. The Gala was a private event, a gathering of the country's wealthiest investors. Everyone here had enough money to never work another day in their life. Some of them had never worked a day at all. Marcus moved through the crowd, tray in hand, and observed. The men were all dressed in tailored tuxedos, each one trying to outdo the next. Their wives and girlfriends were half their age, draped in jewelry that probably cost more than a college education. A man in his 60s, probably a hedge fund manager, waved Marcus over without looking at him. "Champagne." "No please, no thank you, just an order." Marcus handed him a glass, expression neutral. The man took it and kept talking to his friends about tax loopholes and offshore accounts, completely unaware of the man standing in front of him. Marcus had been watching these types for years. He knew exactly how they moved, how they thought, how they looked right through people like him. And then came the moment. A man in his late 50s, wearing an obscenely expensive Rolex, stood in the middle of the room, laughing at his own joke. His face was red from too much alcohol, his voice carrying over the chatter. With a casual flick of his wrist, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a $100 bill, and let it drop to the floor. Then, without even glancing down, he turned to Marcus and said, "Pick that up, boy." The room went quiet. A few people chuckled. Others just waited, eyes shifting between Marcus and the man, who had just made it clear what he thought of him. Marcus looked at the bill on the floor, then at the man, then at the room full of smirking faces and expensive suits. For a long second, he didn't move. Then slowly, he bent down. But not to pick up the money. He just looked at it for a moment, then straightened up and smiled. And that's when everything changed. The room stayed quiet for just a second too long. Not the comfortable kind of quiet, but the awkward, "Did this guy really just not pick up my money?" kind of quiet. Mr. Rolex blinked at Marcus, clearly waiting for him to follow orders like a well-trained pet. The smirk on his face wavered, but the arrogance still intact. Marcus just stood there, tray in hand, looking straight at him like he was debating whether to say something or let the man keep digging his own grave. Then the laughter returned, spreading like wildfire among the other guests. "Oh, come on, it's just a joke," someone said, clinking their glass. "Relax, buddy. No need to get all sensitive." "Shit, at least tip the man if you're going to make him fetch your cash." That one got a round of chuckles. Marcus let them have their fun. He had spent enough time around the wealthy to know how this worked. They loved games, the kind where they held all the cards and everyone else played along because they were too afraid of losing. But Marcus wasn't playing. He exhaled through his nose, still keeping that same damn smile. Then, ever so casually, he tilted the tray, letting one of the untouched glasses of champagne slide right off the edge. And straight onto Mr. Rolex's pristine Italian leather shoes. A thick gasp rippled through the crowd, the sound of scandal hitting the air like a gunshot. The man recoiled, his head snapping down as golden liquid soaked through his $1,000 loafers. "Oh, my bad," Marcus said, voice smooth as silk. "Guess I'm just a little clumsy. Let me get that for you." And then, without missing a beat, he crouched down, took the $100 bill off the floor and wiped the guy's shoe with it. Silence. Mr. Rolex just stood there, jaw clenched so tight you could hear his molars grinding. The amusement in the room had vanished. Suddenly, this wasn't funny anymore. Marcus straightened up, folded the now slightly damp bill in half and tucked it right back into the man's breast pocket. "There, good as new." Panic and power. The tension in the air had turned thick enough to choke on. People didn't know whether to laugh or call security. Some of them looked impressed. Others looked horrified, like they'd just witnessed a man step out of line in a way that simply wasn't done in places like this. The man's face burned a deep shade of red. He looked around, waiting for someone, anyone, to step in and take control of the situation. But the thing about rich people? They don't like getting their hands dirty. They'll whisper about you, humiliate you behind your back. But when the time comes to actually handle someone, they freeze. Because people like Marcus, people who know how to fight back, they weren't used to that. Mr. Rolex finally found his voice. "You little... Sir?" The voice cut through the room like a blade, sharp, professional, and loud enough to stop everyone in their tracks. A well-dressed man in a black suit stepped forward from the entrance, one of the event organizers. He moved quickly, smiling politely, but his eyes screamed urgency. "Let's not make a scene, shall we?" he said, putting a hand on Mr. Rolex's shoulder. "This is a special night. We wouldn't want to ruin it over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Marcus nearly laughed. Oh, this was textbook rich people damage control. Mr. Rolex inhaled through his nose, clearly debating whether to push it further or let it go. His ego was bruised, his reputation slightly stained. But making a scene? That was even worse than losing. After a long, bitter pause, he jerked his shoulder away from the event organizer's grip, brushed off his damp shoe, and exhaled sharply. "Get me another drink," he snapped, turning away as if nothing had happened. And just like that, the room moved on. Conversations picked up, glasses clinked, and the laughter returned, though this time it was a little more cautious. Marcus, meanwhile, stayed exactly where he was, watching it all unfold. They had no idea. None of them knew what was about to happen next. The night rolled on. Champagne flowed, business deals were whispered between clinks of crystal glasses, and millionaires patted each other on the back for making more money than they could ever spend. If you looked around the room, you'd think nothing had happened. But Marcus knew better. He could feel the eyes on him. Mr. Rolex hadn't let it go. Of course he hadn't. His ego wouldn't let him. And now he wasn't just mad, he was embarrassed. That made him dangerous. Marcus carried on like nothing had happened, moving through the room, refilling drinks, blending into the background like the rest of the staff. But he could hear it. The quiet comments, the hushed voices. "Did you see that shit? Dude had some balls. He's lucky he still has a job." They still thought he was one of the staff. And that was hilarious. Marcus had spent years learning how to read a room, and right now this room was buzzing with tension. The energy had shifted. A few of the guests who had been quietly entertained by the champagne incident, they were now curious. Some of them had started watching him, like they were putting pieces together, like they were realizing something. The shift Marcus continued working the floor, calm, composed, but oh so aware of what was about to happen. And then, right on cue, the microphone crackled to life. A voice echoed through the ballroom, clear, confident, controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" The crowd stilled, turning toward the grand stage near the far end of the ballroom. A man in a sleek black tuxedo stood under the spotlight, holding a wireless mic. He was the event's host, some high-powered corporate figure who prided himself on knowing everyone who mattered. Marcus exhaled slowly. Showtime. The host smiled, scanning the room like a king addressing his court. "First of all, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. We are, after all, gathered in one of the finest establishments this city has to offer, and I think it's only right that we take a moment to recognize the man behind it all." There was a pause just long enough to let the curiosity settle in. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the owner of this incredible restaurant, Marcus Williams." The reveal. For exactly 2 seconds, the room did nothing. Then heads turned, eyes widened, mouths opened slightly in pure, undiluted shock. And standing there, in the center of it all, still holding his damn champagne tray, Marcus grinned. For the first time all night, every single person in that room was looking at him. The man they had ignored, the man they had ordered around, the man some of them had openly disrespected without a second thought. Marcus casually set the tray down on a passing waiter's hand, adjusted the cuffs of his perfectly tailored white jacket, and took a step forward, the weight of the room pressing down on him. A murmur spread like wildfire through the crowd. No fucking way. Wait, that's him? Oh, this is awkward as hell. Mr. Rolex, frozen in place. His face had gone through 3 different shades of pale, and he was clutching his drink so tightly Marcus half expected the glass to shatter. Marcus stepped onto the stage, took the microphone, and let the silence sit for just a moment longer. He wanted them to feel this. And then, finally, he spoke. "Well, this is a hell of a way to start the evening. The room let out a half-hearted chuckle, the nervous kind. The kind people give when they suddenly realize they fucked up but don't know how to fix it. Marcus tilted his head slightly, eyes scanning the room. You know, I've spent the last 2 hours serving drinks in my own damn restaurant, and I gotta say, y'all are an interesting bunch. Laughter. Real laughter this time. Some people relaxed, others stiffened. And Mr. Rolex, he looked like he wanted to disappear. Marcus wasn't done, not even close. The laughter in the room faded almost as quickly as it had started. The tension, still thick enough to choke on. Marcus stood there, microphone in hand, looking out at a room full of people who had spent the last 2 hours treating him like furniture. Some of them were shifting uncomfortably, others trying to laugh it off, pretending like they hadn't just been exposed for the entitled assholes they were. And Mr. Rolex? Oh, he looked ready to pass out. His drink was still in his hand, but his fingers were clenched around the glass so tightly, Marcus was genuinely curious if the stem would snap under the pressure. He wasn't making eye contact, not with Marcus, not with anyone. Good. Marcus adjusted his cuffs, took a slow breath, and leaned into the microphone. So, let's talk about what just happened. The room went still again. See, I walked in tonight just like all of you. Except I had on this nice little uniform so nobody saw me. Funny how that works, huh? Some people laughed nervously, but most of them? Dead silent. Marcus kept going. Now I gotta say, this was quite the experience. I mean, when was the last time I got ordered around, snapped at, and ignored like I wasn't standing right there? Oh wait, tonight. Just now, right here. The nervous laughter? Gone. Now it was just quiet. Marcus smirked, tilting his head slightly, watching them squirm. And then, of course, we had our little moment. He turned his gaze directly to Mr. Rolex, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. $100 bill, huh? Thought I'd jump for it? Marcus took a slow step toward him. Or maybe you just wanted a good laugh? The room was uncomfortably warm now. No one was drinking, no one was speaking. Marcus could feel their eyes shifting, waiting for Mr. Rolex to say something, anything. But the man just stood there, face drained of color, lips pressed into a thin, furious line. Marcus smiled wider. It's funny. I spent years building this place from the ground up. My name is on the deed. My signature is on every damn paycheck, but tonight, you didn't see that. Hell, you didn't even see me. A murmur swept through the crowd. Some of them looked genuinely ashamed. Others? Uncomfortable as hell. Marcus exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. But you know who did see me? My staff. And just like that, he turned toward the line of waiters standing at the back of the room. Men and women who had been working tirelessly all night, taking orders, serving food, picking up after people who wouldn't even look at them. Marcus pointed at them. These people, they see me, they always have. A ripple of movement. A few guests shifted in their seats, looking down at their drinks, at their hands, at anywhere but him. And then, just for the hell of it, Marcus turned back to Mr. Rolex, his grin widening. So, sir, I gotta ask. He folded his arms, pausing just long enough to make the whole room hold its breath. Would you like me to pick up your money now? Silence. Pure, deafening silence. And then, laughter. Not from the guests. From the staff. One of the younger waiters straight up wheezed, trying to hold it in. Another covered her mouth, shaking with suppressed laughter. Even the damn bartenders were grinning. Mr. Rolex's jaw tightened. His face, still unreadable. But his hand? That damn hand was shaking around his glass, his knuckles white. Marcus tilted his head again, still smiling. No? Silence. Didn't think so. And with that, he turned toward the crowd, exhaled a slow breath, and set the microphone back on the stand. Then, just to make a point, he walked right past Mr. Rolex, his shoulder barely brushing against the man's expensive suit, and headed toward the waitstaff at the back of the room. He gave them a nod. A silent, "I see you." They nodded back. And then, Marcus walked the fuck out, leaving the richest people in the city sitting in stunned, horrified silence.